I think like most of us, I've really struggled with the constant pressure to get more done, whether that's designing faster, making more content, or generally optimizing my time to be more efficient. I've tried a lot of the common productivity advice, and while some of it has been useful, I think a lot of it has been really effortful or has taken a lot of time to implement and try. So I just wanted to share my personal journey and some of the things I've done in the last year that's been super easy, but also made a really, really big impact. Hey everyone, I'm Elizabeth from Designerup, helping you become a more skillful and mindful designer. I wrote, recorded, and edited over 40 videos last year. I wrote 52 plus blog posts. I wrote a book. I taught a lot of students. I held a bunch of live Twitter spaces, a few live workshops, and there was also some client work and other side projects sprinkled in between. And I did it pretty much all on my own, and I managed to do it with what felt like a lot less effort and a lot less stress than it had in previous years. Baseline tracking. You cannot optimize what you don't measure. And for me, the first step was starting to get an understanding of where my time was being spent in the first place. Now, I used to do this a lot when I first started my business, but lately when things had started to go off the rails, I really started to make a more regular habit of this. And so I do this by using a time tracking app, and I use Billings. And so I would set up a timer for each task that I'm doing throughout the day. And you can do that as you're going if you don't have your whole day completely planned out. But I would just set up an individual timer and then hit start when I'm working on that item and pause it when I stop, pretty easy. And this allowed me to see a really accurate time record of what tasks and projects I spend the most time on and the least time on. I'll tell you, when I first started doing this, I was really surprised to find out where my time goes sometimes, and I think you might be too. So for example, I realized that I can design a website in about 6 hours, depending on complexity, but that it takes me almost double the time to code it. So I learned that by delegating that, I could save so much time on certain projects because that's the part that gave me the most friction. You can't work faster. There's a lot of talk about how to speed up your process and your workflow, but in practicality, you can't really add a significant amount of speed to a lot of the tasks we're doing, especially as creatives. And I noticed that really any marginal amount of speed that we do gain is usually offset by something else. There is compelling evidence to show that speed is often confused with hurriness or busyness, and that leads to overstimulation, stress, and mistakes, and can actually work against our productive output. And just to clarify, by productive, I just mean that I'm able to produce a lot more content, do a lot more work at a high quality, and actually be less stressed about it. And that's kind of what it means for me. So while you can't really work faster, what you can do is either remove, delegate, automate, or shorten tasks. Again, this is why number one is so important. By establishing a baseline and understanding what you're doing and how much time you're doing it for, you'll have the insights you need to make decisions about how to shift your time or energy. Which brings me to my third thing, time versus energy output. Most of us think that what we're trying to solve is the problem of lack of time, when really the issue is managing our energy. When I'm feeling overwhelmed, I find it really helpful to think of tasks in terms of energy output instead of time commitment. Even though a task may seem quick or small, it doesn't mean that it doesn't require a high amount of energy to get done. So I think of my day in terms of energy buckets. Now this could be emotional, physical, technical, verbal, and then I try to prioritize one high energy output task per day in one or two of these areas. Then two smaller low energy output tasks in other areas. So say for example, you have to call your mom. This could be a simple, quick task in terms of time, but for some of us, it could have a high emotional energy output. Completing a course lesson, for example, could take a long time, but it could be a low energy physical or emotional output task. So becoming aware of what costs you time versus energy, and then managing and prioritizing your tasks based on that is really a good way to help you move through the day, help you move through overwhelm, and still feel productive without burning out. Now, you've probably heard this one before, but keeping a journal is really, really helpful. And it's even been scientifically proven to benefit our brains and our mental health. But the thing is, you don't have to sit down and spend 10 minutes writing a novel every day. It doesn't have to be complicated. And you can do it anywhere you take notes or even in your calendar. And sometimes for me, it's just as simple as noticing when I'm feeling tired and then jotting down what happened right before that. It could be that I just had a really big lunch and maybe I ate something that didn't really agree with me, or I ran into my neighbor and I really feel drained. Those types of little cues over time help you recognize patterns and then adjust to those things so that you can eliminate those out of your life or adjust your reactions in some way. And once you notice those patterns, then you can get on with some good self-care and refilling those low energy areas with just good self-care, self-compassion, and mindfulness about them. You don't need to be original. As a designer, I was guilty for a long time of feeling like if I didn't do it from scratch, I was a hack. So I struggled to create every web design myself to avoid being influenced by other designers or copying their work, and just generally feeling that if I wasn't being original, I wasn't a good designer. I learned that that couldn't be further from the truth. Starting off with things like existing UI kits, design systems from other brands, pre-made illustrations, and icon packs are all things that help me to design faster and to leverage the expertise and the knowledge and the resources from those that specialize better than I can in those areas. So I always encourage my design students to study from the best and take advantage of the design elements that our wonderful design community openly shares with each other. If we're free from the burden of trying to be completely original, we can stop trying to make something out of nothing and we can embrace influence instead of running away from it. I realize that I am a product of my surroundings, my environment, everything I've seen and heard, and nothing we do is wholly unique, but it's through us that our work has a unique expression. And fully embracing that has made me a much better designer. Patterns are better than shortcuts. Have you ever just totally forgotten what you were doing in the middle of doing it? Like forgotten a shortcut like how to copy and paste or how to enable grids in Figma? I have, a million times. That's because according to brain studies, memory is notoriously sus and pretty unreliable. And our short-term memory can only hold about 7 pieces of information at the same time, and for only about 20 seconds. So sometimes the better thing to do than just trying to memorize things is to try to remember what to do when you forget. And I just call those kind of memory patterns or memory pathways. And that could be just closing your eyes for a few minutes, which has been proven to help you retrieve information easier. Or you could just try to remember the one shortcut that shows you all the other shortcuts. For me, whenever I kind of figure out a workflow or a task flow, I take a minute to write that down. I'll often write those steps in Notion, and that way I don't have to fully rely on my memory every time I do that, because a lot of times when I go back to something, maybe it's an old design file I was working on or something like that, and I can't quite remember what I was doing, at least I can go back to that checklist, refresh my memory on what was happening, and then jump back into the process. I've created a lot of amazing Notion checklists for designers that are free on Designerup.co. And this is so helpful whenever I'm starting a new design project and I just need to get everything in order before I get started laying things down on the page, and that I don't forget anything in the process. And you can get those in the link in the description. Speaking of, however, most project management apps end up managing you. So the mistake I made when trying out all the note-taking and project management apps was that I didn't really invest the time to figure figure out what it is that I really needed. And also, I spent way too much time, again, trying to do everything from scratch. Now, it's really good to have a goal and take some of that time to just simply draw out on paper a structure for what it is you need and how you think. I was the kind of person for a long time that liked Evernote, which it's kind of page-based entries. But what I loved switching to Notion is that I could map my mind a little bit better using the database structures and the view structures. And once I wrapped my head around that, it was really easy. And I kept it really simple, and I started with pre-made templates. Now, I did this for our design students as well. I made an entire product designer workspace and UX research templates as well, and portfolio templates for Notion, and you can pick those up as well. Link is in the description, so that you don't have to start from scratch and so that your project management app doesn't manage you. Creating constraints to boost my creativity. What I found is that if you really want to stifle my creativity, take away my constraints. It may seem counterintuitive, but whenever I'm in a creative or a motivational rut, I learned that it's not necessarily that I need more inspiration, it's that I need better constraints. If I've been staring at a blank screen trying to design something for too long, I know that I don't have enough of the following: either time constraints, requirement constraints, or vision constraints. So instead of pushing through, what I try to do is create more boundaries around what I'm doing. Now, that could be only forcing myself to use 2 colors for a design, or creating a layout that I'm not allowed to break, or trying to see how many design ideas I can produce in like 10 minutes with the Crazy 8 exercise. It's ironic how restricting no limitations can be. Reset expectations. When things do not go as planned or move slower than I expect them to, or I run into obstacles, I get pretty mad, mostly at myself. And I can usually see it coming too. And yet I refuse to reset my expectations. And what that does really is just create resistance in the mind, and anything we resist persists. You've probably experienced it on one of those days where everything is just going wrong and then it just keeps going wrong. Well, when life happens, sometimes the best thing we can do is just let it happen. And it takes a minute to adjust and reorient to the present reality. But I think once we do that, it leaves space to find another path, or it kind of reveals to us another reason why things are happening and unfolding the way that they are. Slow down to speed up. I know that sometimes we have deadlines and sometimes we have to push through, but something that really helped me is that when things are being blocked, I just let them be blocked. I think of the Taoist saying from the Tao Te Ching, practice not doing and everything will fall into place. This is about that resistance again that prevents us from doing something. And maybe we just need to pivot to another activity or another task for a little while, or maybe just go outside and take a walk. I know every time these productivity videos talk about taking a walk, it's really not as trite as you think. It can really work, and there is science to prove that taking a break, getting fresh air, getting out can really help reset our brain and get us back on track. Meditation, this one is by far the most important to me. Like clockwork, if I miss 2 days of meditation, I slowly start to feel more anxious, more irritable, more impatient. There's a lot of me clicking around at my desk looking busy with no actual work being done. There are many meditation studies that have shown the powerful brain and well-being effects of meditation, even with short meditation sessions and regular mindfulness practice. And I'll link some great, very short, quick meditations that you can do to help boost your energy and your productivity. So by my calculations, I've worked a lot less hours and I've felt a lot less stressed, even though I've output about 10 times more than I did in the previous year, and at a higher quality, I would say. And I did this by learning where I spend the most time, delegating, deleting, or automating tasks, and just overall slowing down to take better care of myself. And the surprising result is that I've become more effective, and I think that these things can help you too. So I hope you'll try them out and let me know what happens. And definitely check out my other video on one of the other important mindset things that I think are absolutely game-changing for our mental health.